For an experienced sailor like Steve, it's nothing out of the ordinary.
I'd seen a lot worse weather before. And so I figured, well, it'll probably be a day or two and this will scoot by. And I wasn't worried. Everything was fine.
As night falls and the rough weather continues, Steve switches on the autopilot and beds down for the night.
People think that sailing is a very quiet undertaking. It's not. Big waves are slamming against the side of the boat. You get this quite jerky motion, but I was still able to kind of lie down, and I was kind of half asleep. All of a sudden, there was this big bang on the side of the boat. There was just this huge flood of water immediately.
Steve has no idea what he's hit, but the boat's hull has been torn apart.
The water was rising very, very quickly.
Within seconds, the water is above his head.
I just thought, this boat is going to be underwater. I'm going right to the bottom.
Steve's boat is sinking. He knows he has seconds to get to the life raft up on deck.
So I yank on the line, and if the line keeps coming out, no, nothing. It just didn't work at all. Finally, boom, it pops open.
Steve makes it to safety. But just as he's about to cut himself loose, a terrifying thought hits him.
With the equipment that's in the raft, I will not last very long at all.
Everything he needs to have any chance of survival is stowed deep inside the flooded boat.
It was essential that I go back on the boat and dive down and get equipment. Even though I realized that the boat could slip under the waves at any moment.
Against every instinct, he knows he has no option but to dive back down into the sinking boat.
It was all dark in there, so I couldn't really see anything. I could feel the ditch kit. It was tied down, and I started cutting away.
Steve frees his emergency supply kit. But just as he makes it to the exit hatch,
The hatch slammed closed. The boat's covered with water. I'm going down. I thought that was it. If I don't get out of here right now, I am going to die. There's 100% certainty of that.
but just as Steve's lungs are about to burst, a huge wave breaks across the boat.
All of a sudden there's air It was a huge, huge relief.
With only seconds to spare, Steve escapes, clutching his vital emergency supplies.
I jumped into the raft and I saw that I was drifting away from the boat.
Steve can only watch as he drifts away from not just his boat, but also his dream.
I went drifting off into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It just was kind of devastating. That first night, it blew hard, really cold and really wet and really scary. I was shivering a lot and I was worried about dying of hypothermia. I might not make it till the morning.
Dawn breaks to reveal the true horror of Steve's situation. His boat is gone, and he is alone in the middle of the Atlantic.
I'm a long way away from anybody, and I'm in a very empty part of the ocean as well. I am just this teeny, teeny little thing surrounded by this immensity of sea. It was kind of overpowering.
Steve has no means of communication and knows that no one will be looking for him.
I told people at home, I gave them 5 or 6 weeks after I left the Canary Islands as being, don't worry about me if I don't show up this time.
Steve calculates he's 1,000 miles from land and completely at the mercy of wind and currents as they push him further westwards, out into the ocean.
I was in a place where there was basically no shipping, and I really needed to get to the shipping lanes to have any chance of being picked up at all.
Steve estimates that the shipping lanes are 350 miles further west. But even if the winds still push him in the same direction, it will take him at least 2 weeks to get there. And he only has a tiny supply of emergency drinking water.
I was worried. I had 8 pints of water, which theoretically was good enough for maybe 8 days.
Without enough water, he has almost no chance of making the shipping lanes alive.
It's a great irony that the world's biggest desert actually is the ocean. You can't drink any of the water there. There's no shade, and my chances of survival were almost hopeless.
Along with a harpoon and a few other supplies he rescued from his boat, Steve discovers 3 emergency water purification kits, known as solar stills.
The solar stills that I had were created during the Second World War for downed pilots. I never knew anybody who'd actually used them before. I've got 8 pints of water. It's over 2 weeks before I reach the shipping lane. So the solar stills were absolutely critical to any long-term survival.
Steve fills the still with seawater, knowing that the heat of the sun should separate the salt from the water.
I'd have, half hour, I've got a whole bag of water. I kept trying them again and again and again.
Steve cannot figure out how the solar stills work.
It's seawater. It was just seawater. It just didn't work at all.
And now he faces his first full night adrift in the ocean.
I was desperately lonesome, and there was no part of this that was not kind of a hellish experience.
Steve knows that it's essential he solves his drinking water problem, and the storm gives him an idea.
I knew that most survivors had relied on collecting rainwater.
If Steve can use the raft's canopy to collect rainwater, he may have hit upon an answer.
It was pretty much like drinking somebody's vomit. It was just so awful, it was undrinkable.
The orange pigment from the canopy contaminates the water.
I decided I'm never going to drink the water off the canopy. It was just too dangerous.
Steve's quest to find solace out at sea has resulted in horrific isolation, and he can see no way out of his ordeal.
I wrote my own epitaph that day. My name is Stephen Callahan. I was shipwrecked at approximately this position. I am drifting in a 6-man raft. I'm doomed. I just felt like I was totally doomed.
The currents are pushing Steve westwards, towards the shipping lanes, his only chance of rescue. But he's over 2 weeks away, with only enough water to last him a few days.
It wasn't going to keep me alive very long. You know, I'm taking a little sip every now and then, hardly even swallowing it, really. It's just being more absorbed. I'm getting really thirsty.
Steve ekes out his supplies for a whole week, but knows his only hope are the solar stills. But first he must understand what he's doing wrong.
It was critical to figure out how to use these things. Just like go back just from square one and try to figure out how does this thing actually work.
It's a drastic step, but he decides to rip one of his 3 precious stills apart, in the hope that he can work out how to make them produce fresh water.
Right.
And it finally dawned on me, it had to be inflated just the right amount. To get the solar still to produce, I'm talking a spoonful of fresh water was like the hugest high I could possibly have.
Steve? Steve is also increasingly ravaged with hunger.
I was starving all the time, and your body starts eating its own muscle. As a result, I was getting skinnier and more desperate. There's just this great emptiness that can never be filled up. I speared the Storado.
But just as he thinks he's landed a fish,
It went right through it, and the Dorado just busted the end of the spear off. and the Dorado just rolled over and ran along the bottom tubes. It was just like one of these, oh my God, moments. There was a horrible sound, and it was just like, all these bubbles coming out. The thing just deflated really, really quickly.
The impaled fish has punctured the life raft. Steve is now sinking into the ocean.
And I knew I was in serious, serious trouble. Pretty short order. The whole bottom tube was completely deflated. It ripped a hole about that long in the tube. I thought that I could go indefinitely as long as the raft was in one piece, and now the raft isn't in one piece anymore. Maybe this is going to be the end of the line.
With the crucial bottom ring of his raft damaged, it is now too unstable for Steve to fish or collect water.
It was like I was walking in rubber quicksand. Plus, it's not really drifting very fast with the wind. So I'm not going to make it if I don't find a solution. I kept getting a repair on there, and I wound stuff around it really tight, and I'd pump it up. I kept doing it again and again and again for days.
Please. Oh.
It was really very depressing because I just didn't think that I could fix it.
Steve knows the punctured raft is a disaster. He's going slower, wasting precious calories pumping it up, and now faces an even bigger problem.
I started consuming both water and the fish that was hanging to dry. I was unable to renew that stock while the bottom was deflated. I imagine it wouldn't have been a whole lot longer before I would have died.
For 10 days, Steve exhausts himself trying to keep the raft inflated, but fails. After battling to stay alive for so long, it's the final straw.
I was absolutely beat. That was it. I gave up. I just laid down. I was like, I just totally broke down. You're gonna die all alone in the middle of the ocean, and you've never done anything successful in your life. I only had failed marriage, failed relationships. I'd never really given enough of myself to anybody. I just wasted a life.
Starving, thirsty, and without hope, Steve feels that death is now a certainty.
And then I got scared. This is very real, and you're gonna be dead in a matter of hours if you don't snap out of it and get yourself together.
In a final act of desperation, Steve searches for anything that might save his life.
And it just, something happened, and it just clicked, and I go, oh yeah, the fork.
Steve hopes that a fork might just be strong enough to secure a patch to the raft.
I couldn't jump around and jump for joy or anything, but that was just like the hugest victory of my life.
But Steve's elation is short-lived. His supplies have virtually vanished. He's still hundreds of miles from land, and his body is desperately weak.
Well, yeah, I got out of that, but now what? I'm still doomed. There's a day off your life. There's another day off your life. I really didn't think I was gonna make it. It really was a period of just hanging on. Oh my God, this is such marginal life. Looking at my watch and thinking that minutes had passed, looking at it again and it being like 30 seconds had passed. It was like, it just seemed to drag on a really long time.
After 66 days alone, Steve's final lifeline is gone. His solar stills have reached the end of their working life.
The cloth on the bottom is rotted out. It's going to be totally useless. There's no way to repair it.
His only means of producing drinking water is now gone.
I just figured this really is it. You know, I have no hope anymore. It was ending.
Steve now only has 3 cans of emergency water left, and his body's toxic salt levels are pushing his sanity to the limits.
The physical part of me is going, hey, there's water over there, let's go snag that. But there was that overbearing rational part of me that was going, no, I don't care. Unless, you know, you are dying, you're not getting into that right yet. This is a view of heaven from a seat in hell.
Alone on the ocean for over 70 days, Steve's body and mind are now shutting down. His only hope is to reach land.
I expected to see the islands like days and days before now. I should be reaching the islands. I should be seeing some sign of reaching the islands.
But then Steve has a shocking realization. If he's miscalculated his position, currents will sweep him back into mid-ocean and certain doom.
Maybe I'm way north of the islands, next stop England, you know, 8 months from now. So that was tough. I was very worried that I had screwed up and I wasn't going to make it. I just don't know anymore. Maybe I'm dead. I've never been dead before. Maybe this is what it's like and this is what I deserve for my shabby life, and maybe I'm just gonna be floating around out here forever. I felt all the hopelessness of people who'd been adrift at sea before and never came back, and nobody ever knew what happened to them. And here I was amongst them, and I could kind of feel them all around me. It just was a horribly desperate feeling. It was over. I was just done. I had no more to give. All of a sudden, it was like all kinds of crates and bottles and plastic. To me, that was the first definitive sign that I was coming into changes. I'm gonna see something. The sun rose. It was like, pff, there's an island in front of me. I couldn't have been more than 10 miles out. To see the green of the island was like, it was it was intense.
But to his horror, Steve realizes that the island is an impregnable fortress of vertical cliffs and razor-sharp coral reefs.
Oh my God, I've come all this way, and there's no way I can make a landing.
After enduring so much for so long, Steve can't let salvation slip away from him at the final hurdle.
This voyage is ending today. No question about it. One way or the other, this is going to come to an end. That's great. I couldn't believe somebody was actually out there.
On the morning of his 76th day adrift, Steve is spotted by some local fishermen.
He said something to the effect of like, "What you doing out here, man?" You know, it's like, well, I'm not out here, you know, improving my suntan. My senses were like plugged into an electric circuit somehow. They were all amplified so that every color was like really, really vibrant and every smell was really, really intense. It just was like heart-wrenching. It was so beautiful to me.
Having endured 76 days in his tiny raft, Steve's leg muscles have atrophied and he weighs just 100 pounds. After 6 weeks in the hospital, Steve is reunited with the parents he thought he'd never see again. The small island of Marie-Galante, where he's found, is just 60 miles south of his original destination, Antigua.
There's nothing noble in me having survived. It's just what I did. I had too much unfinished business, and I think that kept me alive to a large degree.
David Whittlesey is about to head off on an epic journey down the Colorado River.
As early as I can remember, I was off in a little boat rowing around on water. I've discovered that I really, really enjoyed that kind of activity and the beauty and the solitude of the great outdoors.
Well, it looks like I'm going to be the only one on the river. We might as well pull up over there and start unloading.
David has been on a waiting list for a permit for 2 years. But when another raft trip is suddenly cancelled, it opens up the window he's been waiting so long for.
I was living a life of a bachelor and had no particular personal ties that would inhibit me from doing a trip like this.
But while David craves the solitude, the permit has also come in winter, a time when few others dare to take on the river. And this will be his first ever solo journey.
I didn't really intend to do a solo trip per se, but I didn't want to not take advantage of the fact that I had a river permit. It was an opportunity for me to use some of my skills in terms of building my rafting frame and figuring out how to package my particular boat. I would guess it weighed close to 2,000 pounds with all the gear I had on it.
Despite David's careful preparation, he's still apprehensive about going it alone.
I do remember when I first shoved off from Lee's Ferry, I really was quite nervous at the time. My primary trepidation had to do with the fact that I was going to be by myself entirely. As far as cell phones, you might as well forget those. They don't even work in the Grand Canyon.
With no means of communication if he gets into trouble, David's only backup is for his friend to raise the alarm should he fail to return as planned.
My parting words were,
Hey, if I'm not at Pierce Ferry when you get there, call for help, because it means something went wrong.
David's journey down the Colorado River takes him through the remotest part of the canyon, hundreds of miles from civilization. The journey of nearly 300 miles goes without a hitch, and he soon forgets his earlier apprehension.
I navigated almost the whole trip. Basically, all I had to do was continue on and successfully arrive at my destination.
The trip has tested all of David's rafting skills, and he's had the desolate beauty of the Grand Canyon all to himself.
There is no place quite like the Grand Canyon. You're a mile below the normal surface that we walk around on, and there's rocks exposed that are millions of years old. I mean, the beauty of it is just, it's very difficult to put into words.
As one of the few people willing to brave the freezing winter conditions, he's found the extreme solitude he was looking for.
The silence is unbelievable. I just find it, the solitude down there is just entire, complete. You're on a 280-mile voyage that is totally isolated from the rest of the world as we know it. Once you're there, you're on your own.
David also knows his epic solo journey into the wilderness will be a life-changing one.
Almost everybody that goes down there comes back with a different outlook on at least one aspect of their life.
David has just 3 days left of his month-long trip through the canyon.
At that point, I'd done 100 and some rapids successfully without flipping or finding myself thrown out of the boat.
But now, he must face the one part of the trip he's been dreading. The most dangerous rapids on the entire river. Lava Falls.
You can hear lava falls long before you get to it. The tension kind of builds the closer you get to it and the noisier it gets. The general practice is that you get out and you scout the rapid before you go through it so you can sort of pick out where the major obstacles are.
Every set of rapids on the river has been rated for difficulty.
In the Grand Canyon, they have a rating system based on 1 to 10.
Lava Falls is a 10.
It's the true measure of a boatman. Even though I'd navigated all these previous rapids without use of my wetsuit, I was scared enough of the potential calamitous nature of lava falls that I put my wetsuit on. Above the rapid, there's typically a pool, so the water's really, really slow. And then all of a sudden, your velocity increases dramatically. The sense of acceleration can be disorienting in and of itself. Lava Falls has an actual waterfall, a 14-foot drop. I was terrified. It is readily avoidable if you know what you're doing and pick the right course.
But David is now completely out of control.
I can remember very vividly my boat turning vertical and nosing straight down the falls. I was slammed forward into my ice chest. The boat, for reasons which I still cannot figure out today, bounced back upwards, even though my boat by then was entirely filled with water. It was upright and I was still in it and we were still floating. I was thrilled. I figured I was home free. I remember thinking, you're done, you've made it. You've successfully navigated all 100 and some rapids in the Grand Canyon, and you're only 50 miles or so away from the end of the trip, and it's basically all flat water.
With Lava Falls behind him, David removes his life jacket and wetsuit. But he's forgotten there are still several rapids ahead.
My first recollection that I was in any danger was when I found myself floating directly into these rocks. They're sharp pointed and they look like teeth in a dog's mouth. And I was sideways to the current at the time. I knew that was something I really did not want to allow to happen. I did take a powerful stroke with my upstream oar in an attempt to pivot the boat around the rocks. I can't believe this is actually happening. I first thought that my boat will be fine and then it'll pivot itself around and float off of this thing.
But the current has pinned the raft tightly against the rock.
And before I know it, the boat shot up in the air. I was just totally stunned. How can the river be that powerful to shoot this 2,000-pound raft up in the air? I remember, looking down at the water and going, uh-oh, we're in big trouble now. I came up underneath the boat. My head was out of water and I was breathing.
The water is barely 40 degrees, and David knows he must get out fast or he'll freeze to death.
I was concerned that I would become entangled in the raft. I'm wet and I'm cold and I'm with an upside-down raft.
With his raft now useless, he has no way out of the canyon. His only option is to turn it back upright. But with the raft weighing 2,000 pounds, that's going to take all his ingenuity.
I wasn't going to be able to just get underneath the raft and push it up and over. I realized that the only way of righting the raft was going to be to use a pulley rope configuration.
But to rig the pulley, he's going to have to go under his raft to retrieve the equipment. Into the sub-zero waters of the river.
It's dark under there, you can't see anything. I'm basically working by, blind feel. I have a picture in my head where things ought to be, which doesn't mean that they are because everything's topsy-turvy and turned upside down. And I have to force myself to get in and out of the river to get this stuff. I needed pulleys and carabiners and webbing and rock climbing anchors.
With each trip under the raft, David's core body temperature plummets, and he must battle the extreme effects of hypothermia.
We don't often have experiences of prolonged cold, and that's what I was dealing with. Your blood thickens when it's cold, so, there's less oxygen being provided to your muscles, there's less oxygen being provided to your brain. You don't think as clearly or as sharply, and I was aware of that process occurring to me.
It takes David more than an hour to rescue the necessary gear. By the time he's done, he can barely move. But now he must figure out how to rig the complex pulley system.
I was very cold, and my thinking processes had slowed down, but the time it actually took was considerable.
David knows that if he can't haul the 2,000-pound raft upright, he'll be stranded.
I didn't even get it close to upright. One of the anchors let loose, came zinging by my head.
All of David's efforts have been in vain. His only option now is to find a way to lighten the load.
I could look downriver and see that there was a sort of sandy alcove a little bit downstream that I figured if I could get the boat over to, then I would have a large enough area to unload the rest of the gear.
But it's impossible to drag the boat along the steep shoreline. Cold and desperate, David decides to take a massive gamble.
Realizing that I was not going to be able to wade along the shore and pull the boat down with me to this alcove, I got on the boat. I remember standing up on this upside-down raft with one oar, trying to navigate downriver to get to this sandy alcove, sort of like a Venetian gondolier with his one oar navigating the canals.
But the river is so powerful, it's impossible to steer.
I tend to turn more than the raft when I try and turn the oar.
Swept past the safety of the alcove, he's now hurtling towards the next set of rapids, with no way of navigating his way through it.
There's literally nothing to hang on to. There are no handholds, no toe holds, nothing.
Desperately fighting for breath in the icy river, David's got to hold on to his raft or risk drowning.
And I managed to grab the lifeline around the boat.
But the powerful current drags him and the raft into huge underwater rocks.
It floated up onto the rocks and dragged me over the rocks with the boat.
David is faced with a desperate decision. If he keeps hold of his boat, he'll be smashed into the rocks. If he lets go, he'll lose everything.
My thinking was, if I don't get out of this river, it's going to kill you. So there I am, standing up on this outcropping, watching my boat float away and calling after it, hoping it would come back to me like I was calling after a dog.
Come on!
I was frightened. I kept hoping that by some bizarre circumstance it would eddy out someplace where I would be able to get to it. And once it disappeared from view, I just go, good God, what am I into now? I realized I was in a pretty serious predicament. There's not even a spot to sit comfortably, much less do anything else. I started, seriously considering what my options were. Do you want to try and hike out of the canyon? Just what are your options?
Trapped at the bottom of steep cliffs, David can see no option but to try to scale the sheer rock wall to safety. It's painfully slow progress. After an hour, he's still only 30 feet above the river.
I'm traversing these rock faces using my toes on little cracks in the rock and using as much caution as I possibly could conceive of due to the fact that I was alone and, any falls would be catastrophic.
But the higher he climbs, the more unstable the rock face becomes.
This dislodged rock decided to roll down onto my foot. It resulted in breaking a couple of toes as this rock landed on my foot. There wasn't anything I could do about it at the time.
Climbing upwards is agony, but the cliff face is too steep to descend. So he has no option but to keep going.
I grab onto a rock. I'm using it as a handhold to work my way around sort of an outcropping, and the rock comes off in my hand. And then I sort of teetered there for a few seconds, minutes, hours, days, lifetimes, who knows. I lost my balance and fell over completely backwards, sliding head first on my back across this rock face, thinking, you're dead, this is it. My life jacket caught on something. It flipped me completely over in a backward somersault. I hit my chin on something hard enough to break 4 teeth, knocked myself entirely unconscious. I found myself in the Colorado River coming up out of the water, spitting teeth out of my mouth. I could see another sandy spot further downstream from me. I'd say a half a mile down from where I was. I knew that just getting myself into this alcove that I could see was going to be a challenge. And I'm probably a good 30 feet above the river, and lo and behold, right in front of my face is a can of beer.
The beer can is the first sign of life he's seen in over 20 days. But he quickly realizes it must have been washed up in floods years earlier.
This beer has been there long enough that the label is just about entirely faded off of it.
Having lost all of his supplies, David knows it could provide a valuable source of energy. After 4 days fighting to stay alive, it seems a search party has finally come looking for him.
I jumped up and down and waved my arms.
Help! Hey!
You're looking at this plane, and you can clearly see it.
Hey!
I'm wearing a bright red life vest.
Here!
It's just inconceivable that they can't see you.
Hey! Here!
But as the plane banks away, David realizes he's invisible from the air.
Hey! Come back! Come back!
His only hope of rescue
Come back!
has gone. As he prepares for a fourth night, David knows he's in desperate trouble.
I was getting to be pretty depressed. And I realized that, something had not happened the way it was supposed to.
If I'm not at Pierce Ferry when you get there, call for help, because it means something went wrong.
David is unaware that his friend has assumed he's just extended his trip. No one is even out looking for him.
I was aware of the fact that I was in a dire predicament, and the longer it went on, the more frightening it became.
With no hope of rescue, David is at the mercy of the hostile canyon and totally alone. For 4 days, David has clung to the hope that his friend will raise the alarm. But he now realizes that no one is looking for him.
The mental battle was probably harder than the physical battle, keeping myself from allowing myself to believe that I was really going to die right then and there.
David is determined to dig deep.
I'm laying there doing nothing, and you can't just sit here and do nothing. You got to try something. I wasn't going to give up and say to hell with it.
But by now, his physical condition has deteriorated so far, he can barely stand.
My feet by then were just totally trashed, and it was very difficult for me to walk anywhere at all.
Despite the pain, he decides his only hope is to make himself more visible from the air by building a large distress signal. But that means shifting hundreds of rocks from the water's edge.
All of the rocks were down in this drainage, so I'd have to, go down there and grab up 1 or 2 rocks or whatever I felt that I could carry, and then drag them back up on this hillside.
It's an agonizingly slow and painful process.
I built a rock X that was probably 10 feet long, each arm of it. So, that's a lot of trips up and down, a lot of rocks to carry.
It's late afternoon by the time he's done, and he's utterly exhausted. It's 3 days since he last ate anything. He's now so weak, he's desperate for energy.
As every barfly knows, there's a sandwich worth of calories in every can of beer. I definitely advise against drinking 8-year-old beer. Definitely not one of the tastiest beverages I've ever imbibed.
Despite his exhaustion and hunger, he can't afford to rest. The temperature is dropping fast, and he's running out of firewood.
I started gathering the stuff that was closest to where I was, and then every day I'd get a little bit further away, so I'd have to spend more time gathering it up and getting it there. Obviously, you're becoming weaker and weaker all the time, and it becomes more difficult to do the things that you did the day before. As I was doing that, there's this little tiny lizard. It was probably, maybe 4 inches long, kind of scooted out across a rock. For some amazing reason, I was able to be quick enough to actually swat it. I kind of broke it in half and swallowed it down. was hungry enough by that point in time, too, that I would eat anything. I was feeling that since I have no idea how long I'm going to have to do this, any nutrition I can get whatsoever is going to be better than none. You served a good cause.
David's ingenuity and determination have helped him survive for 6 days, injured and alone in the Grand Canyon. He expected to be rescued days ago. But now the hostile winter conditions have taken a terrible toll on his body, and he's beginning to lose his mind.
I had all kinds of wild fantasies occurring, you know. The world had been devastated by nuclear explosions, and I was probably the only human left on the planet. Particular incidents or scenes out of my past history would come to the surface of my consciousness.
Hey!
I remember pretty vividly thinking about and remembering events that I had shared with various different friends and so forth, and thinking about them and being sad that, you know, I might not see them again.
Now too weak to gather wood or maintain his fire, David's core body temperature is dropping rapidly. He's losing his battle with hypothermia. David Whittlesey came to the Grand Canyon to experience peace and solitude. But stranded and at the mercy of the elements, he faces freezing to death, alone.
By Saturday morning, I was pretty down. I was, you know, really depressed. I wrote a farewell note to my family and friends and carved it into a little piece of driftwood. I marked down the number of days that I thought I'd survive there. It was important to me to let my friends and family know that I was thinking of them and that my death had been accidental.
After 7 days fighting to stay alive, David has nothing left. All he can do is lie down and wait for death.
I had done everything that I could think of to ensure that I would survive, and it seemed like, you know, nobody cared. My first inkling that something was happening was the noise of the helicopter. fairly rapidly increased in volume and noise. When the helicopter came around the corner, I was stood up and I was waving my arms and jumping up and down and crying and laughing. And I mean, there was a great sense of relief. And you know, I've never experienced so many emotions all at one time as I did right then. I was laughing because I was so happy to have survived the whole ordeal, and I was crying because I was so grateful for having survived the whole ordeal. It really was an upwelling of emotions that was totally beyond my normal range of experience.
Having discovered David's capsized raft 20 miles downstream, the park authorities had launched a search and rescue mission.
They were amazed to find me still alive. They told me that they were sure they were looking for a body. The pilot had a sandwich that his wife had made for him. It was probably one of the best sandwiches I've ever had in my life.
"7 days after his accident, David was finally airlifted to safety. He went on to make a full recovery and is still passionate about rafting.
I never did believe it was my time to die. I do believe that you can enhance your chances of surviving by believing that you are going to survive. My life has changed significantly because of this incident. In some deep spiritual sense, that I have a more positive outlook, and I also think I have a better grasp on what it means to be alive.